quiet, which suggests that you're expecting it to start, so we'll start. Welcome everyone to the Planning Committee for May. It is May, isn't it? I'm Brian Morby, I'm Chair of the Planning Committee. On my left is Richard Lewis, who is the Head of Development Management. On his left is Paul Wielden, who's Group Leader for Transportation and Highways Development. Norman Jones over there, standing up by the dais, is a team leader in the planning department. Helen Smith, just down here, is the planning officer. On my right is Rachel Beale, who's taking the minutes of this meeting, and on her right is Tim James, the Assistant Chief Legal Officer. Hopefully most of you will have seen the notice as you came into the chamber to say that you are being recorded. And I've forgotten your name, sorry. Over there is controlling the cameras. Courtney, sorry, thank you. Controlling the cameras, which actually will pick up people speaking, albeit the speaking rules relating to planning committees are fairly strict and will normally be restricted to members and officers. But you could be on camera, is the point that we make, so be careful in that regard. For members of the public in particular, you'll see on the doors or above the doors there are signs indicating where the fire exit is or are. We're not expecting there to be a fire drill this afternoon, so if they do go off, then it probably means we need to vacate in an orderly fashion, and those of you who know about the building will make sure that visitors get out safely. I think that's probably it by way of introduction. Apologies for absence, please, Rachel.
We have apologies from Councillors Neil Waite, Stuart Ashley, Barry Taylor and Norma Parish.
Any other apologies, members? Good. Okay. So item 2 then is declaration of interests. Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Number of declarations I'm aware of, members. Firstly, if I can begin with Councillor Crick. In relation to item 5 on the agenda, planning application relating to the Specialist Critical and Care Centre, I believe you wish to declare a personal non-prejudicial interest in relation to that application for 2 reasons. Firstly, you're a member of the local community council who were consulted on the application, and secondly, you're also a member of a stakeholder committee on the health board, but you're not a board member. Is that correct, Councillor Crick?
That's correct, Mr. James. Thank you.
And one other declaration, I think, for you, Councillor Crick, is in relation to item 7 on the agenda, application relating to Lana Raven, again, as a member of the community council who were consulted, a personal-only declaration. Is that correct?
Yes, again, correct.
Thank you. Councillor Nigel Davis, again, in relation to items 5 and 7 on the agenda, as a member of the local community council who were consulted on those applications, personal-only interest, I believe, for you on those?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you very much. And then Councillor Jessica Powell, in relation to item 6 on the agenda, the application concerning Victoria Street in Old Cwmbran. You're a member of Cwmbran Community Council who were consultees, and therefore I understand you wish to declare a personal-only interest. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you very much. And then I think, Chair, you wish to declare an interest. Do you wish to deal with that yourself, Chair?
Yes, please. I wish to declare a prejudicial interest in respect of item 5 on the agenda, the construction of the Specialist and Critical Care Centre, because I am, one, a member of the Aneurin Bevan University Health Board, and secondly, I'm also on various working groups and subcommittees, I suppose, which are looking at some of the details of the construction of that centre, and therefore I will need to leave the room because of that prejudicial interest for that particular item. Thanks.
Can I at that point propose that Councillor Leonard Constance takes the chair in your absence?
Thanks very much. Councillor Evans, that's agreed by Councillor Cameron. Is everybody happy with that? Thank you very much. Good. Thanks, Stuart. Can we move on then, if there are no other interests people want to declare, to item 3, which are the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 28th of April. Before I ask you to approve them as a true record, there's a couple of issues you need to be aware of. Richard, would you relate one particular issue on page 7?
Certainly. Yeah, in the middle of page 7, the paragraph that starts, planning officers considered this discrepancy to be acceptable due to the difference of levels, which was 4 metres. Although that's a correct record of the minutes and what was said, it is actually incorrect and not factual. It's actually 2 metres, not 4 metres. The report at that time was correct, but it was 4 metres that was identified, not 2 metres. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. So, you happy that the minute is accurate, but the information within it was not, and therefore that correction needs to be made and agreed by the committee today? And whilst I'm speaking on the matter of accuracy, under item 4.2, the bottom of page 7, there's an extra not, N-O-T, in that particular first sentence, and Councillor Cameron didn't say that she did not think it would not be necessary. There's one too many nots, so if you can delete the second not, and if you're happy with that, could you agree that that is the true record of that particular minute?
All of those corrections, Chair.
Fine. Are there any other items on the minutes which members wish to raise or wish to query the accuracy of? So, all happy with those? Thank you. Now, the next item is item 4, a report to consider the expediency of taking formal enforcement action in relation to a planned discrepancy of residential development of 54 dwellings in Hill Street, Blenavon. This is a matter which was considered by the committee at its last meeting, but which was deferred pending a site visit, the report of which is appended to this particular report. That's the site visit which took place a week ago on the 5th of May. The report is basically the same as came to the meeting last month, and Norman is going to say a few words about it, bearing in mind, of course, that we've already had the report on one occasion.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as the Chair has said, this was discussed at the last meeting, and obviously the site visit took place on the 5th of May. Going back to the issue, planning permission was granted for 54 dwellings at Hillside School. The application was approved in May 2014. Following commencement of development, our attention was brought by the adjacent occupier to a potential discrepancy in the construction, and what came about was that the developer agreed to undertake a survey from the various points of the corners of the proposed dwelling, which at that time was at footing level. And from that survey, it was proven that the original position of the complainant's dwelling, which sits adjacent to the site, was not accurate. That was based on an ordnance survey plan. However, what the survey showed was that the accurate position is shown in orange, hatched in orange in that location. So effectively, the accurate position shows it shifted 1.137 metres to the southeast. The distance between the the dwelling, the proposed dwelling and the existing dwelling remains roughly the same, just a slight increase from that. So that was development checked out, and that was shown to be that discrepancy. The distance from the kitchen window, which was the window most affected, was 13.4 metres away from that kitchen window, not taking into account of any difference in levels. So that's the view from the construction site adjacent to the scaffolding during the course of construction. The affected windows are the kitchen window, which you can't see there because of the difference in levels, directly below the bedroom window there. That's the view of the kitchen window, which members would have seen a view from at the site visit. And that's the view from the kitchen window. Obviously, it's in a state of construction with the scaffolding, giving it a greater impact. That's another view from inside the kitchen window. Now, in terms of difference in levels, what the developer did during his survey was to, from the accurate survey, it shows the position of the existing dwelling in relationship to the gable end of the proposed dwelling. And what you see is that the proposed dwelling is slightly offset from that kitchen window, with a difference in levels of approximately 2 metres sitting below the complainant's dwelling, and the roof sloping away. Now, this section, we had sections at application stage. This section here shows the position of, if I go to the next slide, shows the position of this block of properties. We know that this, in the report, this is mentioned as being 13.6 metres away. Just to give you an idea, there's a quite significant offset to the other dwellings, which is positioned here on that corner, and those dwellings are at about 38 metres away from the closest point of the complainant's property, with a gap in between the backs of the dwellings. And this dwelling, if I go back to the section, which is this section, shows it to be approximately 5 metres below floor level. The difference in the relative floor levels between the complainant's property and these dwellings is 5 metres. To just give you an overview in terms of the impact from the complainant's property. So in terms of the impact, obviously we've concluded in the report that the impact of this discrepancy doesn't really change our view in terms of the acceptability of the development as we approved it. Whilst it is a discrepancy, we don't consider it to be significant and have an effect that over and above that would be unacceptable or would be foreseen. Whilst it is a change, as the agents for the applicants have said, it's a relatively minor change. Now, the case law in terms of dealing with various errors which occur on plans seems to suggest that there has to be facts which are grossly misleading in any information. In terms of this, the application was based on an existing OS survey plan in relation to that property, and that was slightly out by 1.2 metres. However, the position as it stands on site is well within what we consider to be acceptable parameters, and therefore we're recommending no further action. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Norman. Members will recall the report and the previous presentation, actually, in which Norman read out the concerns expressed by the complainants, Mr. and Mrs. Watkins, which are on page 16 of your reports, referring to the poor consultation process, the alleged unhelpfulness of Mellin, the alleged misleading of Mellin in terms of the status of the planning application. So I'm not going to read all of those out, but I do want members to be aware and just recollect the nature of the complaints, as well as the recommendation from the officers that the discrepancy is not in itself sufficient, in the professional opinion, to render the approval inappropriate, and therefore the recommendation that the complaint be declined, I suppose is the right term, is what is being put forward. But members, some of us visited, and I know at least one member has a different view, and Councillor Evans, would you wish to move an amendment?
Yes, Chair. I feel that Mr. and Mrs. Watkins have been treated quite shabbily over this. I think there was an easy solution to it very early on when Mr. Watkins flagged this issue up. And in fact, my ward colleague met on site with the developer at that time. But since there was no development taking place after that, so I can really sympathise with Mr. and Mrs. Watkins, and all the agents for Mellin point out that there's no visual impact or, in fact, neighbour amenity that is lost. I feel there is in this instance, and on this instance I wouldn't support the officer's recommendation, and in fact I would make an amendment that the enforcement action be carried out.
Fine, thank you. Is that seconded? Thanks, but I need to wait to see if that's seconded. Is anybody seconding that? Oh, sorry, Councillor Furzer, I didn't realise that.
Yes, I'd like to second the amendment.
Okay, fine, okay. And do you wish to speak in?
Yes, I concur with my ward colleague. I think that discrepancy certainly has had a negative impact on the facilities at the site there, on their amenities. And I'd also, although I note that Mellin were very cooperative with the authority, I think they've dealt very poorly with the complainant, and their behaviour leaves a lot to be desired. So I will second the amendment, and I won't be supporting the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks. Does anybody wish to debate? Councillor Cameron?
It's not really a debate, but I was the only one who felt the site visit wasn't necessary. However, I did attend it. And I do have some sympathy when you see the view that the complainant had. You can understand. Nobody would want to lose that. But having heard what the officers have said and taken into account, it doesn't give us any planning. There's no planning guideline that can say that they can recommend anything other than it's okay. And I can absolutely understand, and I can be sympathetic when you have a view like they had. Anybody would actually complain that it was going to be lost, but we can't legislate for a view.
No, and that's a critical point, I suppose, that views aren't protected by planning legislation, and if the application were turned down on those grounds, then that would almost certainly be lost at appeal. I'm going to give someone else a chance before because you would close the debate, actually, Councillor Evans. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Crick, then Councillor Powell.
Thank you. I was just wondering whether the planning officer could indicate on that photograph just where the roof line will come.
No, I'm not quite sure what stage that is at. That's above we're going up to first floor level there. I think if we go back to the sections, that shows the kitchen window is superimposed there. So effectively the kitchen window will be partly obscured by at first floor level in that view when you look in that way. What I would mention, the reason for myself introducing the position of the other buildings, which are 38 metres away, is that those dwellings obviously won't be close to the complainant's window. So effectively, if you're talking about view, obviously view isn't a material planning consideration, or little weight is given to that. The view in one direction, you will obviously see the gable end. However, the view is interrupted, or not interrupted, the other way in terms of the view across the valley. You will obviously, from some windows, see the roof lines, but certainly the impact is in relation to that gable end. Does that help?
Not entirely. Like Councillor Cameron, I can sympathise when you have a view like that and that feeling of openness to suddenly find that that's obscured must be very hard. But again, that's not really a planning consideration. It's we're looking at something later on where much is made of the welfare of the people in the hospital and the views that they will have. And that's considered a major aspect of that particular development. And when you look at that and think along similar lines, you can understand how upset the residents are in this case.
What I would say, it is obviously a change, a significant change from, in terms of built development from what it was before. But what members have got to consider is the change from the approved plan. Now, the shift in the relative position is 1.2 metres to the southeast, and in terms of the significance of that shift over what's already been approved, which we consider acceptable, that's, I think, what we would have to consider.
Councillor Powell.
I just want to say I agree with everyone else to sympathise, but obviously I don't think there's enough in planning considerations to enforce. I would just say as well, it seems a shame that at the early stages they weren't clear with the applicants about showing them, initial plans versus the actual plan. So I hope, obviously it's outside planning consideration again, but I hope they take that into consideration going forward.
Councillor Cameron.
Sorry to come back, but having been there, and of course the building is substantially, it's up to roof level, I believe we saw, wasn't it? Yeah. So it was there. I think that's quite a fair photograph, though, because the actual view, if you look to the right, is still considerable. There's quite an aspect the other way. I think, that has concentrated on where the new building will be, but the actual view is directly to the right as well.
Anyone else wish to speak? Are you happy to vote? Yeah, but you to end the debate, which is why I want to make sure that no one else wants to speak. Richard, would you care to make some comments before we vote?
I think really only to reiterate what Norman's already said, that the actual distance between the buildings has already been approved. So that distance that Norman mentioned is what has already been approved. So that in that position, the distance is approved. It's the slide by 1.2 metres is the issue, and it's come across that kitchen window by that much. And if members... in terms of members' consideration, it's that bit that they would have to consider, not the fact that the house is that distance from the property. The other thing that I would say is, of course, we are recommending that no action be taken. If members are minded not to go with a recommendation, that would mean that some members are asking that some action be taken, and obviously we would have to know what that action members want, really, from that point of view. I think that's all I need to say, Chair.
So, Councillor Evans is going to wind up the debate, but there are sort of, I suppose, three potential choices. One is that you accept Councillor Evans's recommendation, albeit that doesn't specify what needs to be done. Secondly, that you decide to accept the officer's recommendation, that the complaint be declined or that no enforcement action be taken. And thirdly, I suppose you could defer if you felt that you needed any further information, though it's hard to see what other information you might require. So, anyway, at the moment, what we've got is an amendment from Councillor Evans to request that enforcement action is taken. And if that is carried, then maybe we need to continue to discuss the matter to ascertain whether or not we can specify what enforcement action might be considered appropriate. Councillor Davis.
Just ask a question. Would it be in order for, is if there was a motion saying that we agree with the officer's recommendation on the basis of planning guidelines, but there are still concerns concerning what is concerning the activities of the developer and the way that they seem to have acted towards the complainant, which have caused concern to the committee. Would that be in order or not?
I'm struggling with that one. Tim, any views?
Well, Chair, I think really it's only a matter that could be properly recorded in the minutes that if the committee are concerned at what's gone on in this case, and that it comes out in the minutes in that way, and then no doubt officers will relay this to the developers who are fairly active in the borough in any event. But I mean, in terms of an actual decision, I think it comes down to at the moment the officer's recommendation there's no expediency to take enforcement action. That's what they're recommending. There's an amendment to say that it is expedient that enforcement action be taken, and the members have got to make a decision on that basis. I don't think there's really a sort of halfway house whereby we're saying, well, we're not taking enforcement action, but we'd have liked to, if you like. It's not really that. It's just something that can't be in the actual decision. It's got to be something in the minutes, I believe.
So it's all been as in the minutes that the members have said that while they accept the officer's recommendation, there's still places where they feel that lessons could be learnt.
Well, I think that's fine. I mean, sympathy has been expressed whatever the decision is, but we need to get back to the rules of debate, I suppose. That's my fault, really. But Councillor Evans, if you would care to sum up, and then we'll vote after your submission.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to point out, I think it's key that I point this out, that Mr. Watkins is a builder, and he's got no objection at all to the development, other than the inaccuracies that we are discussing this afternoon. He's not opposed to development. His life has been in the building construction industry. He's not opposed to it at all, but it does impact, he feels, on his property.
Okay, so we'll take a vote now. First, it'll be for those in favour of the amendment. Would you please show? That's 2, 3. All those against the amendment, please show. I'm afraid the amendment is lost. The substantive motion, therefore, is that we support the officer's recommendation. Please show. And that is, well, it's going to be carried. But for form's sake, all those against, please show. Okay, that is carried, substantial majority. So, Mrs Watkins, I'm sorry, if you care to depart now, welcome to stay if you want, but I suspect you prefer to go. Thanks very much. Okay, and I'm going to go too for the moment, at least. I'll vacate the chair as I'm declaring my interest on the next item.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Next application number 15P0097 is in connection with Lamfretford Grange Hospital. I understand we have a presentation by Helen Smith.
Thank you, Chair.
Please present it.
The application we're considering today relates to a previous outline planning permission that was granted in November 2012 for the development of the Specialist and Critical Care Centre at Lamfretford Grange. As part of the application, the outline planning permission, access was agreed to the development. The application that we have in front of us is the Reserve Matters application for the layout, the landscaping, scale and appearance of the Specialist Critical Care Centre. If I just go through some photos showing the site, this photograph here shows you the location of the proposed access, which is a roundabout, and as you can see, the trees have already been cleared in preparation of the provision of the roundabout. This roundabout will provide access for the emergency vehicles, staff and visitors. This is the existing access to the current hospital. This access is going to be widened and provided retained access for the laundry building and the delivery and service vehicles. As part of this application, this access road is going to be widened, but it's going to be widened to the south. This enables the protection of these trees which are currently protected. This is looking north from the existing car park within the hospital. As you can see, some demolition works have already taken place for the existing buildings. Here you have, if you have a look on your right here, this is the wall garden, which part of the proposal is to retain and refurbish this facility. This is looking looking east from the public right-of-way, which comes off Cullion Road. It's currently used as temporary construction access. And then this is also looking east, and this is one of the areas of the woodland which forms part of the site which we retained. Here we have the master plan for the site. This is the proposed roundabout, which has already had approval as part of the outline planning permission, linking onto Cullion Road. It provides the emergency access up to the emergency entrance. This then provides access to the parking areas for staff and visitors, and then the road then carries along Cullion Road. Here we have the existing access, which then serves the existing laundry unit and the service yard and the energy centre. Here is the main building of the critical care centre, and here is the helipad. Just to give you some bearings, this is the nearest residential property, just Ysgubor Farm and the old farmhouse. And just down to the south, you have the listed building of the Grange building, which is currently used for offices by the Health Authority. And this is a plan just further expanding on the primary transport routes. Cullion Road along here. This is a pedestrian and cycle access linking to the main entrance to the building, and the emergency access, and there's a spur here to provide future access for future industrial development as part of the local development plan. Here we have the sections and the elevations of the building. This is the north elevation. Basically, The helipad is located here. This is the energy centre with the required flue, which is located at a lower level. And just behind there, then, you have the existing mature belt of trees. This is basically looking from the farmhouse south. This is the southern elevation, again, with the energy centre and the flue. This is effectively the rear elevation, which is the eastern elevation. Again, here's the energy centre and service yard at a lower level. This area here is the main sort of treatment diagnostics zone. And this is the main elevation, the western elevation, which is the main care unit where all the rooms are located. The helipad is located over here, and the parking areas and the entrance to the hospital is by here. As you can see, there are flues required for functional reasons and clinical reasons on the roof of the building. Given the location of the site, there are key views to the main building, and they are mainly from, there's public right-of-way coming up along here, so there's a key view here. You have views from the helipad, again, the public right-of-way goes across there, and then the main entrance to the building, and then from the public car park area. So we have some 3D images showing the design and the format of the building. So this is looking from the main entrance up to the building. This is a location, this is a view, from the public car parking areas in the entrance zone. This is from roughly the location of the helipad, showing the lower level of the service area at the back and the treatment zone. Here we have the emergency access for the ambulances and the people brought in from the helicopter. And then here you have just another view of the emergency access, the care zone and the treatment zone. Here we have some CGI images of what the main entrance will look like. Just for you to note that the flues aren't shown on this image. And again, the CGI, this is the main emergency entrance. Landscaping is a key issue in relation to this site, given its sensitive location in a rural area on the boundary of the urban area. So the landscape strategy has been developed so that the ecology and nature conservation of the site is protected and enhanced, but it also has been developed to ensure that the building sits comfortably and integrates into the landscaping around it. As you can see, large parts of the existing woodland and trees are to be retained, especially this bank along here, which will serve as a significant buffer when viewed from the east. And then, as part of the landscaping strategy, we have significant woodland planting, some hedgerow replacements, and then you have the more formal areas of landscaping around the car park. We also have a wall garden, and part of the proposal is to recreate the garden within here. But the Health Authority has engaged with the community group to develop these proposals in the future. We have had comments from our landscape officer, which aren't reported in your report, but he's confirmed that he has no objection to this proposal. This is just a visual, an artistic impression of what hopefully the wall garden will finally look like, and that will be used by the community and by visitors and staff. Just to conclude, we've had no objections from any local residents. We have had some comments from a representative from FLAG, which is the local action group. They haven't objected in principle to the hospital. They had some concerns about the future housing development and future bypass, which is addressed in your report. The officer's opinion is that the layout, scale and appearance and landscaping of the Specialist Critical Care Centre is acceptable, and that the Reserve Matters application complies with the outline permission and the 2012 environmental statement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Helen. Right, we'll go over to members' question time. I'll hand it over to you. Yes, Councillor Davis.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to a couple of clarifications, well, for explanation. On page 29, 3.5, we're talking about with the traffic. Could it be explained, please? I know what a pelican and a zebra are, but what's a toucan crossing? And on page 35, 5.2, the issues rising from consultations about the third paragraph about the highways, about the outline application, proposed improvements to encourage pedestrian use of the A4042 underpass rather than existing. Again, this at-grade crossing, which, as far as I know, is just a brief break in the road. You have to dash across the dual carriageway. So just to clarify on that, has anything about further aspects of road safety, for example, even notes that we've discussed many times, have we made a request about maybe putting a footbridge at that area? So if you could just clarify those two items, please.
That's no problem. We'll pass this over to Paul. Paul, if you'd like to answer, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to note, Councillor, that as you say, this was discussed in quite some lengthy detail at the outline stage. Provision of a pedestrian footbridge was discussed at that time. It's a Welsh Government road. My view at that time was we should have looked at at an overbridge, but it was there. They determined that it wasn't necessary as part of this application. But having said that, what we've got within this application is the Toucan crossing, which a Toucan crossing is for cyclists. It gives a priority to cyclists as well as to pedestrians. That then will link by an improved link down to the pedestrian subway under the A4042. There is an existing subway down by Bath Green, so this site will link into that subway. Notwithstanding that, there is a route which takes you down behind Selby Close, which goes down to the A4042, and that is the at-grade crossing that you're referring to. The at-grade crossing does mean that there are breaks in the barriers, and there is a crossing point at that particular location. But just to also make you aware that there is a link from that crossing point that if pedestrians prefer, they can go along the footway alongside the dual carriageway down to the subway. So that Selby Close link also links into the underpass, and I would encourage people to use the underpass. But nevertheless, the at-grade provision is there should they choose to use it. Thank you.
Next then will be Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Paul. As we know, all hospitals, I was in Abergavenny a couple of weeks ago, it was horrendous to park. And you just mentioned Selby Close and places like using the bypasses. Can you foresee people using the other side of the bypass in the residential estates, using that as a parking area, as a shortcut and cutting across, and what effects would that have on the residential estate opposite? And it's so near anyway, because when that hospital is up and running, I'm sure it will be to capacity, and the car parking will never be enough, as there's not in any hospital,
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I could respond to that. That could always be an issue, but what we've tried to do here is we've worked closely with the developer, and it's in their interest as well to try and get car parking provision to what they consider would be necessary. There are 950 places at this particular site, and what we've also encouraged them to do is to identify areas within the site that can be used for overspill parking, If you look on the plan, you'll see, I think it's 2 areas, isn't it, Helen?
Yeah.
That can provide quite some substantial areas for overspill parking. What I can't do and what I can't promise you is that if that does get full, I can't promise you that people won't park on local residential roads. I just couldn't do that. And we have no policies in place that would provide for residential parking only. The only thing that I can really say to you with some confidence is that we've worked closely with the developer to identify additional areas within this site that could be used if necessary, which are linked to a travel plan that they have to produce. So we will be working closely and monitoring it closely, but with regard to your specific question, I couldn't promise you that there won't be any on-street parking.
Thank you for that, Paul. But as we all know, I mean, we've had an application just earlier on about developers, whatever. I mean, we don't have much faith in most of them because they'll promise you the earth, and when they took their cut out of it and gone, I mean, we just left with what's left. I mean, we've all had experience with developers when they promise this and that. But I mean, it's just for people to know later on, it's going to happen. There will be overspill. I mean, you can go to any hospital to go to now, and they just can't cope with it, you know. If they've got provision for 900 parking spaces, how many people are working there? And it's all by car. Is there a bus route going to be there? Can people catch a bus? That's the main thing, is catching on the bus. And as we know, everywhere in Torvine, the bus routes are being cut. Stagecoach, if they can't make a profit out of it, you don't get a bus route, you know, so we could have something like that.
Thank you, Chair. Just on a particular aspect of bus routes, one of my colleagues, I've encouraged us to talk to the bus companies, and they're quite open in that this is a big attractor for them. I know you're saying that bus routes are cut. Bus routes are normally cut when there are no travellers or very limited travellers, but this is a big generator. So hopefully, with all the right things in place, i.e. they've got adequate bus provision within the site, drop-off points, shelters, etc., the bus companies that we've talked to currently are positive about coming to this site because it's such a big attractor. Hopefully as well, the travel plan will encourage car sharing. It will. I know these are all the words that we say, but hopefully, with such a big development and a public body such as this, hopefully it will work properly, given that there are substantial car parking areas there as well. And we are trying to encourage the bus companies, and it looks positive from our initial talks with them. Thank you, Chair.
Right, Councillor Evans next, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the report. And it's nice to hear a report where you don't get many objectors. I mean, this is a big piece of work that we're talking about here, especially when you deviate from rights of ways, because that in itself brings problems. We're glad to hear that, no objectors as such. Just wanted a bit of clarity around the stacks, because it mentions on page 34, the top of 34, that the airborne substances which can represent a risk to human health if ingested. I have no knowledge of fume cupboards. Could you expand on that, if you could? And will there be in-house monitoring of these fume cupboards to stop the possible harmful effects of humans ingesting this airborne pollutants?
Right, Ellen, I hope you can answer that one.
Okay, thank you. The fume stack cupboards are the facilities that they have in the laboratories in terms of the diagnostics, and sometimes they can use nasty chemicals, which if the person carrying out the work is exposed to them, it can be a danger to their health. So these fume cupboards then vent the fumes up through the fume stacks and out into the air. Our environmental health officer has stated that there's a British standard for these fume stacks in terms of height above buildings, and this application complies with that. basically my understanding of it is that once these fumes are dispersed into the air at that particular height, they shouldn't cause any problems to human health. It's actually the people who are actually in the laboratories doing the work, is my understanding of it.
Yes, just back briefly, Chair. You related to the stacks service in the laboratory areas, but what about clinical waste and the such? Will they be treated in the same method?
I believe in the energy centre we do have the big fume, the large. If I show you the large flue. And that's in relation to all the energy production and the waste facilities. And again, that's been designed specifically so that there is, and it's been assessed as part of the environmental statement in terms of the output, and that our environmental health officers are satisfied with the assessment that's been carried out on potential impacts.
So can I understand then that there will be ongoing air quality measures in place then?
There's no requirement as part of this planning application, but in general I understand our environmental health do consider air quality. I can't answer whether they'd actually specifically go and check this. Might have to clarify that with our environmental health officer.
Right, all ladies and gentlemen, anybody else? Councillor Crick.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just go back to bus routes and car parks? I'm assuming that there will be, much as there is in Newport at the moment, a bus route from the railway station up to the hospital on a regular basis.
The current bus route from Cwmbran Town Centre past the hospital is the Newport Corporation bus, which actually passes goes from the bus station, which is only a short walk from the train station, but nevertheless it stops directly outside the hospital, and that runs half-hourly throughout the day. What we are trying to do, we've talked to Stagecoach as well, and as I said before, they're all interested because they see this as a big generator of income. So hopefully as this progresses, the hope is that we will get better frequencies and different operators all operating to and from the site to different areas, not only Cwmbran but further afield as well. So the hope is through future working we can encourage these operators to provide a good service to that site, and that's something that the travel plan will encourage as well. And no doubt the operator of the site are also, they are also talking to the bus companies as well as us. So, hopefully collectively we will get where we want to be, and that is to have a good bus service to and from that site. Thank you.
Thank you, because I am aware that this will also cover South Powys as well as sort of up to the boundary, if you like, between Caerphilly and Cardiff. The other aspect I wondered whether has been considered, because it's certainly not in this plan, and I can't recall seeing it in earlier plans either, is the possibility of multi-storey car parks in the future as the site gets up and running, and obviously over time there's likely to be further development on the site.
Thank you, Chair. Something like that from my viewpoint would be wonderful, but it's not part of this application, and we believe that the parking requirement as it stands is enough. All I can say is to go up in multi-storey decks is significant cost, but nevertheless the parking provision here is what we believe is adequate. But the planning consent as it stands at the moment, there is nothing in there that would say should there be a problem in future you have to do a multi-storey car park. What it does say, though, this link to the travel plan, is that if there is a problem, you provide these at-grade car parking facilities, which are the additional areas that Helen showed on the plan earlier. Thank you.
Right, any more questions? No? Right, we'll go over to the officer's recommendation of approval.
I'd like to move that, Chair.
Councillor Burnett moves. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Curzon, and all in favour? That's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Okie doke. So let's move on to item 6. This particular application is from one of our colleagues, member of the council, which is why it's coming to this committee. It's not a very difficult one, I think. So there's no plans to have any presentation. Does anybody want to make any comments or ask questions in relation to item 6? Councillor Cameron?
Nothing controversial, just to say I think it's something that, is needed, definitely within the village of Cwmbran. Anything that will put some more life back into it is a good application.
Anyone else? It's a recommendation to approve. You happy with that? Show of hands, please. Any against? Fine, that's carried. Thank you. Sorry? Oh, sorry, abstentions. Yes, an abstention. And then item 7, if I can find it. Again, is only coming to us because the applicant is a chief officer or senior officer. Otherwise, it would have been dealt with under delegated powers. Anyone wish to comment or ask a question in relation to it? It's been moved by Councillor Seaborn that the application is approved, seconded by Councillor Constance and Councillor Burnett. That's thirded, I suppose. Wrong, but never mind. Are you all ready to vote on that? All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you. That pretty much ends the meeting. The next one is the 16th of June, or at least that's the current intention. Watch your emails. Right. Thanks very much. Meeting closed.